It's time now for our sustainable soy update with our friends at the United Soybean Board. Joining us for this week's conversation, she is the past chair of the United Soybean Board and serves on USB's executive committee. She farms with her husband and her family in Missouri. Meagan Kaiser is with us here for this week's update on AOA. Meagan, thanks for being here. How are you?
Hey, Jesse. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Let's talk about soil sampling. And I think just to start, why is soil health so important for farmers, and what are some of the benefits of having a healthy soil on our farm?
Well, often we talk about the sustainability of our U.S. soy product, but it all really starts with the soil. And so one of the things that I talk with farmers about a lot is thinking about the soil as, the body or the immune system. And so not only do we need to make sure that the nutrition is in the soil, but we also have to focus on the biological activity and the physical aspects of the soil too, that really back up that soybean crop as it's in the growing season and supply all of its needs. And so it all really starts with soil health is the first step in our pathway to productivity.
Well, I think about soil sampling, such a key piece of this puzzle, and maybe talk about this. What are some of the main challenges that farmers face regarding soil sampling on their farms?
Well, timing. And we're always short on time, right? And so as we talk about basically following the combine is one of the best times to really get out there and pull that soil sample. We have the potential to maybe get that fertility on in the fall and let it adhere to the soil before freezing, or we have the results to work with come spring. So the first step is really putting it in your plan to take the time and get the soil sampling done. When you're taking a soil sample, the most important thing is you've got to make sure that it's representative. And whether we're talking about composite testing or if we're talking about grid sampling, you have to be absolutely consistent with the depth of your sample. If you're using a tillage program, you might want to be at 6 inches. If you're at no-till, you might want to be at 4 inches of sampling. But the most important thing about soil testing is being able to say, I measured this with my soil test. I know what I put on with my inputs. I know what I took off with my yield, and I measured again, and I can make good data-driven decisions. And so in times like this, when we're at tighter margins, it's so important that we're able to make sure that we're putting the right nutrients in the right spot at the right time to really have a larger return on investment, but also increase our sustainability goals.
Well, and thinking about those measurements and making sure it's representative, I think about the whole field. How do we ensure that soil samples represent the whole field? Because we know that soil profile, even from one quarter of a field to another, can be a little different.
So there's a couple different tools that we have available to us. One is we can grid the whole thing and then make sure that each one of those soil samples, we can go out there, run the boundary, and maybe put it on a 2.5 acre grid is really the most popular that we see. And make sure that you treat each one of those samples as a representative sample. So sometimes I see grid samples come through the lab and there's only 3 probings. It's so important to treat it like a full sample because you're going to make decisions on every one of those samples. So 15 probings, even on a grid sample, is really critical. The next thing that we can look at is zones. We might be able to aggregate our yield data from the past and break it down into management zones. Often I see people try to do this based on soil types. I would advise that you really look at the management that you've had in the past of the field and your own experiences with the yield and the productivity to try to make better management zones. And lastly, we have composite samplings. Maybe we just don't have the time to really do an in-depth job, or it's a new piece of land and we just want to get an idea. It's really important to go to an area and yes, walk around and move through that. But if the field is really different, it's actually more important to just go ahead and pick one area that you choose that at least you're going to get that area of the field correct. And, if you're going to apply blanket to the whole field, make sure you're choosing an area that this is what I want to really improve or really measure, and take a very thorough job of doing the soil sample in that area.
How do you decide how often to soil sample, and what are some challenges that might come with that, Meagan?
Yeah, so two things. One is timing. If you're a fall soil sampler, stick with fall. If you're a spring soil sampler, stick with spring. Again, the whole point of soil testing is to be able to make data-driven decisions. And so we want to at least remove that variability. You can do either one, just be consistent. The other is on how often. If you're doing a composite test, I would recommend more about every year or after every crop cycle. So if you're on a corn or soy rotation, probably 2 years max to keep checking in. Again, if we're making data-driven decisions and we want to not get too far out from the sampling. When we're doing a more thorough job like grid testing, a 4-year cycle seems to be where we can really connect the dots. When we get beyond that, it gets a little bit harder to remember, oh, that was a dry year, that was a wet year. And really tie all the data together to make better decisions.
Meagan, we have about a minute here. Anything else you'd like to add? Any final recommendations for farmers when they're thinking about soil sampling?
Well, the first thing is get it done. It'll really help you make better decisions. It's important for us as farmers, not only for our return on investment, but also so that we can continue our claims of sustainability. For more information about soil health practices and the research that the United Soybean Board does in this area to help farmers make better decisions, visit unitedsoybean.org.
Meagan Kaiser, past chair of the United Soybean Board, serving on the executive committee, also a soil scientist as well. So I know this is in her territory and wheelhouse. Get out and get that soil sampling done. Meagan, thanks for joining us on this week's Sustainable Soy Update here on AOA. We appreciate the time.
Thanks a lot, Jesse.
And again, you can find more online. Visit unitedsoybean.org.